something that's really essential for any web designer, web developer nowadays is something called media queries. So we haven't gone over it yet, but essentially what media queries do is that it allows a web page to be responsive whether or not you're looking at it on a phone, a tablet, or a desktop. So for example, if you go to the UW Eau Claire website and if you inspect the page, you can click on this toggle device toolbar. So it goes from this to this. And then up here, there are preset sizes. So if you want to look at what a website would look on a Pixel 2X, an iPhone X, or you can click responsive. So this one allows you to change a specific pixel size for your screen. So as you can see, as I scroll, make it smaller, everything about the web page changes. And the way it does that is by using media queries. So media queries change how the CSS looks from one set pixel size to another. So best practices are to style your CSS. So our CSS we have here first to look good on mobile. It's a lot easier if you style everything like they have it here with one column, and typically once you style everything to look good on mobile, if you change it to this size, a lot of it will transfer over and still look good on desktop. So typically best practice is you want to do all of your CSS first while looking at your web page in a smaller format, a narrower format, I guess. So let's look at this page. So this is my HTML for that page. So I've already linked up my style sheet up here. I have a header with an H1 in it, and then I have this div with a class of sidebar nav. And I've had some links in here. They don't go anywhere. They just go to the same page with a hashtag. And then I have my main content with some paragraphs and an H2. And then I have my footer down here. And all of this is inside the body. So, and then I have all of this content over here, my CSS over here. So let's inspect this page and take a look at what it looks like right now. So this is what it would look like at 458 pixels by 900 pixels. We can look at it in a variety of other sizes. So now when we get really small, if you notice, the links actually overlap, which is not ideal. So let's go about fixing that. Let's see. Because it's possible, let's do, yes. So let's do display block on these. So that's going to actually change it. They're going to stack from top to bottom like that. And then let's add some margin to them. So margin, let's do 0.5 rem. Save that. So now they're stacked like that. And let's also do text align center because that'll look a little bit better. Putting them in the middle. There we go. Okay, so there are links here. Our header's up here. Main content takes up this screen width. And then the footer's down at the bottom. As far as the rest of my content goes, so for my main container, I simply just added some padding to it and a margin of 10 pixels. Same with the footer, some padding and margin, and the same with my sidebar nav and my header. I didn't add any width to anything because it is display block. The header, the sidebar nav, the div, the main, and the footer are all display block by default, so they're going to take up 100% of whatever the width that they're allowed to. So on mobile, that looks pretty good, right? Good enough. Everything is how we want it to be. So now let's add a media query. So at media, and so we're going to add some parentheses, and inside I'm going to do min width colon, and let's do 1,000 pixels. There is no semicolon after this. Even though there's a colon here, there's no semicolon. Then we're going to add our curly braces and hit enter. So we're going to save that. and refresh, and obviously nothing is happening yet because our web page was still less than 1,000 pixels. But now I have it set to over 1,000 pixels, but obviously nothing's changing yet because we haven't added in any CSS into our media query that we want to change. So let's look at what we want to change. So let's use some display grid, which I just went over, to move things around. So let's add display grid. Let's add body. So I'm going to add my body selector inside of the curly braces for the media query. So this is something I want to change on the body, but only once we get to 1,000 pixels. So then I'm going to do display grid, and then I'm going to do grid template columns and grid template rows. Okay, so let's see. For my columns, I eventually want to have this green sidebar nav over here on the side, and I want the main content next to it, and then I want the header and the footer essentially where they are. So I'm going to need 3 rows. So let's start with the rows first. Let's say I want to have the top row take up 25%, and then I want to take up the rest of it automatically, and then I want my footer to only take up 150% or 150 pixels. Let's see what that did. Okay, so obviously things are floating out of things, but that's fine. Okay, because there are no columns yet, so it doesn't know how to place them from left to right. So let's see. For my columns, let's do 250 pixels and auto. Oop. Let's save that. And let's refresh the page. Okay, so this is how everything is stacking up so far. Obviously, we don't want this over here, and right now that's the reason that's happening is because these are where our lines are, and so the header is only taking up the first cell, then the sidebar takes up the second one, and so on and so forth. So let's go and move things around. So first let's move the header to where we want it. And we are going to add this inside of our media query too, because we only want this to happen when we're on desktop, so when we're over 1,000 pixels. So let's do grid column, and let's do grid row. And let's see, we want it to start at the very beginning on column 1, and I believe we're going to end on 3 if I look at this. So 1, 2, 3. Yep. So it's going to end over here on line 3. So we're going to end on 3. And then for the row, we obviously wanted to start on 1. And then we wanted to end just inside this top one here. So I believe that is going to be 2. So yeah, 1, 2. So we're going to end on 2. Let's save that, and let's see what happens over here. Refresh that. Yep, so that looks a lot better. And honestly, this is already right in the correct spot. This is in the correct spot. So now we just need to make sure that the footer takes up the whole entire bottom here. So let's go into here, and let's change the footer, and let's add where it's going to go. So now I'm going to use the shortcut for this one. So hopefully you remember this. So it's going to be 4 values divided by slashes. So let's see. So the first one is what row it's going to start on. So let's see. 1, 2, 3. It's going to start on 3 and it's going to end on 4. So it's going to start on 3. And then this is going to be the column. I'm just going to put 1 there for now, and it's going to end on 4, and I don't know what column it's going to end on yet. Okay, so now we're going to decide where it's going to start for columns. So it is going to start on 1, so 1, 2, and then it's going to end on 3. So let's end on 3. Okay, save that, refresh, yay! Now my footer is taking up the whole bottom. So now you can see how that is working from everything that's here. So obviously everything that is outside of the media query, if it's not redefined inside the media query, it still is being applied. So my padding of 2 rem on all of the containers is still being applied. You can see that here, this padding around here. My margin of 10 pixels is being applied around each of the containers, the colors and everything like that. But as you can see, when we shrink this down, once we get below 1,000, it jumps to now no longer be display grid. So that's a really useful application of media queries and display grid, honestly. So let's change this back, see, back and forth. Okay, so now let's also go over adding in some JavaScript. So in one of the labs you'll be doing this week, I believe lab 12, you'll be adding in some JavaScript. So this is the JavaScript you'll be adding in, and I give it to you. You don't need to know exactly what everything does in it, but essentially what is happening is we will be adding a class of toggle nav to an element in your HTML. And what happens is when you click on the element in your HTML, it'll add a class of show to whatever element you want it to add to. And then you'll be able to add properties to that to make it display or not display and so on and so forth. So I'm just going to go over a little bit how that's done. So I'm going to add a nav because this is probably the most useful application of using this into here. Nav. And I'm just going to copy these links because I don't feel like adding or coming up with new ones. Okay, so let's move these over so we're lined up vertically and it looks nice. Okay, so now let's add in the JavaScript. So I've already saved my JavaScript toggle-nav.js file into my folder. So it's right over here in my folder. So now first, and don't worry, I will go over this again in the lab once you get to this part, but let's go over how you do it. So in the head, not in the header, in the head, you're going to add a script container right here. You will not be putting anything in between the angle brackets here, but you will be adding src, so our source, and we're going to do toggle-nav.js. Okay, so now we're going to save that. So now if a script is running in this file, it'll know to look at that file, the toggle-nav.js. Okay, so we've added a nav. So let's go back and to here, let's make it into that size. Okay, so one really useful thing, and UW Eau Claire has it, when you click on the little hamburger menu, you get to be able to open up a navigation. On mobile, there's not a lot of space, so it's really nice to be able to turn on and off the navigation and see it. Okay, so I'm just going to add a P, and I'm just going to say menu and P, and save that, and let's refresh over here. Okay, so here's my menu, the P I just added, and here is my nav right there. So let's go through, and I'm just going to style this really quickly to make the menu, the P, look more like a button. So I'm going to do that inside or outside of the media query because I want this to show up in mobile. So let's go under header, and I'm going to add a class to the P. So class menu. Save that. Okay, dot menu. And I'm going to add a background color. I'm just going to make it white. And I'm going to make the color of the text dark red. Yep, that's an option. I'm just going to use dark red. And I'm going to add some padding to it. 2 reps. Save that. Let's see what that looks like so far. Okay, so there's my button. It's a little big. Let's see, because it's a P, so it's display block, so it's taking up a lot of space. Let's actually change it to display inline block and see what that looks like. Okay, so that looks better. And then let's actually get them so they're next to each other. So let's do display flex. Okay, and I'm actually going to change the size of my H1 because it's really big. I have a lot of text in there, so let's just do font size Let's do 1.25 rem. I think that'll be smaller. Let's see. Let's refresh. Yeah, okay. So I've added display flex and all of these items are next to each other. But we really don't want to see the nav right now, not up in there. So let's go and start changing the nav itself. So here's my nav that I'm going to be changing. And I no longer want it to be inside the header. I want it to be more like if you go to Eau Claire's website and you click here, how it's down below the header itself. So let's do that. So let's take it out of there by using position. So nav, and I'm going to use position absolute because I want to put it in a specific spot. I want it to be on the right hand side here, but right below the header. So we're using position absolute and we want to use top and right to position it. But whenever you use position absolute, remember you have to use position relative on whatever the container is that's holding your position absolute element. So the container that's holding it is our header. So we're going to add position relative to our header. Let's refresh. Okay, so right now it's up here in the top because I haven't added any top or right values. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so I can see a little bit better. And I'm going to go navigate through here and I'm going to select my nav. So now I'm going to actually add in, let's just start over. Oh. So I'm going to add in my values in here. So I'm just going to start with 2 rem just to see if that's right. And right, I want it to be 0. Because I know that's about, okay, so we'll start with that. So I'll just do 13 rem and 0. And I'll probably have to tweak this shortly, but that's fine. And 0. Okay. So refresh that. So it's essentially where I want it, but obviously I don't want it to be a transparent nav because then you can see all this stuff underneath and it's kind of hard to read. And also I don't like the purple and the underlines because that's how the default looks in black. Okay, so let's go into our nav and let's add a background color. And let's do deep pink. And let's add a color to the text. Oh, but because there are A's inside of the nav, I can't just add a color to the nav itself because the A's themselves have a default color, so that will override if I put a color in the nav. So we actually have to do nav space A, so any A's inside our nav will get a color. So add a color, and let's do goldenrod. That sounds good. And then let's also add some padding to these. So let's do 1 rem on the top and bottom and 3 rems on the left and right. Save that. Let's refresh. Okay, but I want them to stack from top to bottom, these links. So let's actually change how they are displayed. So currently they're display inline block because that's why they go left to right, and then their margins on the top and bottom don't function. So let's change it to display block because we want them from top to bottom. So let's save that, refresh. Okay, so let's also get rid of that underline, text decoration, none. So now that underline should be good, and this color is actually kind of hard to see on there, so I'm going to change it back to white. Okay. So now let's go over and look and see what we got right now. Okay, so that's all right. It's not bad. Let's add a border around these so then we can tell that they're separate. They're not just one big space. 1 pixel, solid, white. Save that. Okay, so now let's go in again and I'm going to adjust this a little bit better. So it looks like about 11 rems is right about where I want it. So let's change the position on this to 11. Save that, refresh. Okay. And then looking at this, that has display flex already, but if you notice how this is touching because they're flexing right next to each other, there's no spacing. So I am going to go back in to here under my display flex, and I'm going to add justify content. Justify content spaces things from horizontally, so left to right. And I'm going to use space between because I know that is going to push both of those items to the very left and the very right respectively. Okay, so that looks a lot better. Don't really like how this is kind of lining up on the top with this, so I'm going to use align-items. So align-items and center, and we'll save that and refresh, and now they're lined up vertically as well, so that looks pretty good. Okay, but as you notice, when I click on this menu, it doesn't actually do anything yet. There's no JavaScript running because it doesn't know to run it yet. So let's go into adding that all in. So if you go into, once you get to your lab, I have this all set up so you don't need to memorize it, and I don't need to either. Okay, so we've already made our function here. So, and we've already added in our script here. So now we need to add this on click. So I'm copying that and I'm going to put that on this menu button. So the on click goes on to whatever you want the user to click on to make this function, which is this function here, trigger. So we've added the on click onto the menu. But when they click on that and it shoots this function, what the function is doing is it's looking for this class of toggle nav, but we don't have toggle nav as a class anywhere on here. So we are going to add it onto our nav because when we click on the P, we want it to look for this navigation and we want it to function on that. So I'm just going to add in toggle nav here. I'm going to save that and I'm going to go, whoop, I'm going to go back into here and let's refresh. So now when you click, obviously this is not appearing and disappearing yet, but if you notice down here, see where it says show there? Now if I click on it again, it goes away. But if I click on it, it comes back and so on and so forth because it is triggering this function, which is looking for toggle nav, and whatever element has toggle nav on it, it's going to add this class of show once you've clicked on this. And it'll get rid of it if you click on it again. So you could add this toggle nav to anything in here. So we could add on this P, for instance, class toggle nav. Okay, so we could save it. And then if we came back here and refreshed and we clicked on this, and if we went into the main and looked, see, so it has this class of toggle nav and now it's doing the show on to that as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this class of show to show and hide this navigation right here. So now we're going to go back into our CSS and here for our nav. So initially when people open up our page, we don't want them to be able to see the nav on mobile. So we're going to do display none. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to refresh the page. So now our nav has disappeared. It's here, but you can't see it. So now we're going to use the class of show to display it when someone clicks on it. So we're going to go back up here and I'm going to put it above the nav and I'm going to do show just so they're right next to each other, and I'm going to do display block because the nav is display block by default, so I want it to be display block when I click on show. So now we're going to refresh and click and it appears and disappears. Now the same thing, you could do that to the P that we've added this toggle nav to, or you could change it into a different color. But anyways, so that's essentially how we're going to be using JavaScript in Lab 12. Save that. And let's go back and refresh. And so now when we click on it, there it is. So now you're probably wondering, we've done this in the mobile version, what does it look like in the desktop version? So we'll make it big, and this is what it looks like. But in desktop versions, If we go to UW Eau Claire, we make it bigger. All of these navigations are readily available, which is a lot easier. People don't like clicking into things if they don't have to. So let's change this and get rid of everything and make it so it's more desktop friendly. So first, let's get rid of this menu. We no longer need it on desktop, so we have a class of menu. So after the header, I'm going to add .menu. Oop. And we're going to do display none. We're going to save that, refresh. Okay, so it's no longer there, but we have nothing to click on to show our nav. So let's go back into here again. And so underneath nav here, we are actually going to do display block. And we're going to save that, and then we're going to refresh. Okay, so our nav is back, but we don't want it to be outside of the header anymore. We want it to be inside of the header, and we want it to be a part of the header. So what we're going to do is, so initially we added position absolute, but we no longer want that. So we're going to use position unset to change it back to the default, and refresh that. And now it's back up in here. Now we could go through and change it to look if we wanted to make the buttons go from left to right instead. We do nav A, display inline block. Save that, refresh. There we go. So now all of those buttons are next to each other. So, and then if we go back to this and we change it till it gets too small, then our menu button is back. So that's a little bit about what you're going to be doing this week. You'll be doing position display grid, and you'll be using media queries, and you'll be using just a little bit of JavaScript. If you want to learn more JavaScript, I suggest taking 319, and they'll go over that even further. So hopefully this is helpful, and good luck this week, and email me if you have any questions.